Transmission from Nakmun System. Today, we're painting Battlezone Fronteras for Warhammer 40,000, so retrieve your STC template and let's do some hobby. So here we have the Battlezone Fronteras Nakmund box. It's a huge box full of Games Workshop plastic terrain, and inside you've got a landing pad, you've got some STC bunkers, you've got some stockades, and you've got a Vox antenna and Auspex shrine. You also get some cardboard battle mats here. Now the way these are designed to set up are these large enclosed ruins, but the Pariah Nexus Tournament Companion, you'll see most of the terrain are actually designed to be these walls, L-shaped ruins they're usually called. So they also recommend certain sizes of the terrain areas which don't really line up to how it's designed in the box, as well as recommending most of the terrain be over 4 inches. So measuring these up, and the landing pad is a bit too wide, and the STC walls don't really fit the recommended Pariah Nexus Tournament Companion sizes, same as these stockades. So we're going to fix that. So we're going to start off by clipping everything off the sprues with some plastic cutters, and then I use a blunt knife to go and trim all of the little sprue connection parts and scrape off any mold lines that are visible. And you're going to get a lot of shavings by doing this, so make sure you brush them all away. And I use Citadel plastic glue to glue it all together. It's a nice thick glue and it gives a good join, so you just get it all over the connecting parts and then line up the parts as per the instruction, press them firmly together until they stick. So just going to go around and do that for all of the different bits. So the STC walls go pretty easily together, they just slot into each other, a short end and a long end, but this short end is a little bit longer than 6 inches, so I decided to shorten it a little bit. So I took my clippers and started clipping away some of these ridge parts, and don't twist them like I did here, because I ended up actually ruining my clippers by doing that. So then I take a razor saw and just cut it off where I want to get rid of that sort of middle part, and then glue the parts back together once I've cut that middle part away. So then it will be 6 inches long. So then I just put the parts back together, and I want to make this like a U-shaped ruin. One of the Pariah Nexus ruins is a U-shaped, and I also want to have a bit of a gantry running around it. So I took the roof from the bunker and I just sawed it away a little bit, just so it's 32 mils around, and then I took the little part that I sawed off, as well as some of the spare kind of half ruined pieces, just to complete that U around the edge. So once that's done, I wanted to make the ruin above 4 inches, so I took the stockade and I wanted to put it in place of where the railing normally is, but it didn't fit nicely, so I once again took my saw and I cut a groove out of one of the sides of the stockade, and with a bit of filing I got it to sort of sit pretty well against the wall. I used some clipped off plastic parts to fill in some of the gaps, and then I also cut off part of the stockade just to make it fit that U-shaped up to that 6-inch depth that I was going for. So here's what it looks like all up. I think that looks pretty good for a Pariah Nexus type U-shaped ruin, and you can see that it will fit a standard Space Marine or infantry troopers on that gantry too. I used some of the parts from the stockade to fill one of the longer gaps, and found these other like parts that join the stockade to the wall, and I found that was actually better for joining the gaps rather than that plastic that I used earlier on for that U-shaped wall. So I used that to make some little 6x4 inch under 2-inch ruins. So I did that a bunch of times, made some L-shaped ruins, made this little box thing that I combined with a stockade to make another piece, and then I also put together the Vox antenna and the Auspex shrine. So I found that gave me about half a recommended table size of ruins. So I bought another Nakmun box and combined it with a couple of spare pipes I had, and it looks pretty good. And now we're going to start painting. So I use 2 sprays, Mechanicus Standard Grey first, so I spray paint everything in that, and then I do sort of a really heavy highlight with grey sear over the top, and it looks something like that. It looks fairly white, but there's some grey on the undersides. So I now take Praxity White and I do a pretty heavy dry brush over everything just to give that final highlight. It can be pretty rough because there's going to be lots of weathering over the top of that, but looks like that. Now I take Black Legion, and this is the most time consuming part. I go back over any part that's not going to be white and undercoat it in the Black Legion. It does take some time, but the effect that you get, especially when you're painting metallics, is just far superior over black than over white. So just take your time and fill in all of the little parts that you don't want to be white. Now I take my metallics, so start off with Leadbelcher and go over any of the parts that I want to be silver. So these little spiky things up the top, most of the pipes and a bunch of pieces of metal. You can be pretty random. I just pick things that I logically think would be iron or steel rather than some other metal. And next I take Balthazar Gold to just give a bit of a contrast, so not everything's silver, just pick out some smaller parts there in the Balthazar Gold. Next I use Retributor Armor to do like the little glyph plates. There's a few of those dotted around the model. And then finally I do some Screaming Bell just for some little details, these little engine parts and a couple of wires. Next I take some bright colors, start off with Mephiston Red and pick out all of the like buttons and the gauge dials and things like that. So just go around and paint all those in Mephiston Red. And I'm also going to paint, there's a bunch of wires and cables, so I'm going to paint those in these bright colors. So some of them in the Mephiston Red, then go on with my blue and just carefully pick those out. This doesn't take that long, but I think it makes the model pop a lot more if you just have these little splashes of color rather than everything being just white or metal. So I still thought it was a bit monochrome, so I did like a red stripe on all of the pieces. So I use Mephiston Red and then I use Wild Rider Red to dry brush a highlight onto that. So now I want to add a little bit more detail with some transfers. These are some Adeptus Mechanicus transfers. So I just select some, cut them out, and then I use some Decal Fix. I couldn't decide where to put those. I started off putting this on at the top, but then I actually moved it lower down. So Decal Fix, soak your transfer and then just slide it into place carefully, and then you can make some small adjustments and then use a brush to wick off the remaining water. I now use Rhinox Hide and just a piece of sponge. I think this is from an old miniature case, and I'm going to do a stippling effect. So just lightly dab the paint all over the model and it gives that effect like things have been rusting and chipping off. So just go around the whole thing. And next I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to water it down with water because you're going to use a lot of this. And I just mix that together with a large brush and just kind of liberally apply it across the whole model just to give it that kind of dirty, dusty look. You might have to go back later and just get into some of the corners that your big brush doesn't get into. Now, once that's dry, I use some Wraithbone to undercoat any of the lights and also these little monitor thingies. And then I use Ionden Yellow to paint the lights, and then I use Dark Angels Green to do these little monitors here. So that's what it looks like, a pretty quick and easy way to get some really nice looking terrain on your board. I use this same technique for all of the different pieces, so it keeps them all consistent and looking the same, even these little pipes. But one thing that I chose to do a bit differently is the landing pad. I wanted to put some stripes, so I used some masking tape to make some stripes, and then I paint the unmasked side there with Black Legion. I put 2 coats down to make it a bit bolder, and then carefully remove the masking tape. You might need to clean it up a little bit with some grey cere, and then I use Nazdreg yellow to do the yellow parts there. So just go through and paint all those stripes. You don't have to be careful on the black because the yellow doesn't show through it. And I used a similar technique to make some wide stripes on the side, so I'm gonna paint those in Mephiston red. And once you peel it back, you can see you get a very nice straight line. I actually did half of these in red and half in blue. And that's what it looks like once I've applied the rest of the effects to it. Little stairs, and my U-shaped ruin can go on top of that. One last thing I want to do is make some Perspex bases. So I get a big sheet of Perspex and I use a jigsaw to cut it into the recommended area terrain shapes. Some of these are not exactly the right size, but they're close enough. I also get some peel off printable sticker paper, and I label all of these to make it easier to tell which pieces of terrain go on which base. So I select a couple of pieces to fit on, and I use a permanent marker to draw the outline. This just helps when you're playing a game. If you need to remove a piece for whatever reason, it's easier to see where the outline of that piece is, so you can put it back on. And then I use little stickers to match up to the base. This is a really good way to help define where the actual area ruin starts and ends, because otherwise you can have some arguments with some weird shaped pieces. So once that's done, I can put it all together and it ends up looking like that. You can set it up in a variety of different ways, and then it's also sort of future proofing it. If they change the map layouts in the future, you can just cut some new bases and you're good to go. So hopefully that helps, and get out there and enjoy your wargaming.